What's up guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled Nobody Talks About This Texas Problem, which I've heard anything but problems about Texas. I am so excited to go there, hopefully sometime relatively soon. So I have no idea what this video might be about. If it's not like about the food portions being massive, I don't know. Let's see what this video is about.
This is Texas, and with a massive area of more than 268,000 square miles, it is the largest state in the continental US. So large, in fact, that if you were to place whole nations inside of it, as if it were a storage locker, several legitimate nations, the Netherlands, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and others would fit comfortably. Texas is also home to America's
Isn't Texas bigger than Spain?
second largest population and economy, with at least 31 million residents and a gross state product of $2.3 trillion. Of course, California tops Texas in both metrics, with the nation's biggest economy and its highest population, but California isn't growing like Texas, and Texas is growing like crazy. No, California's population and economic output have faltered in recent years, as famous Californian institutions and more than 1 million of its residents have already moved to Texas. And that's something that I've been meaning to address, because in one of my first videos here on this channel, I posed the question of if Texas is becoming California, ultimately arguing that the two states had become more similar than ever before. And I stand by that conclusion, mostly, but if you look at how Texas is trending in business, population, and culture, those similarities are largely limited to the pitfalls of overpopulation and diseconomies of scale. And it's increasingly clear that immense growth isn't changing what the Lone Star State stands for or how it functions. So while some states, even ones half the size of Texas, often seem to have this effect where different portions of the state feel like entirely different places, something you can see in California, where West Coast cities feel nothing like small mountain towns or agriculture-based counties.
Or now that I know things in Washington where there's a rainforest and then the other side is completely different.
Texas, for all its sprawling landmass and varied geography with the Chihuahuan Desert, the lower Rio Grande Valley, and the Central Hill Country, mostly just feels like Texas. Maybe that's because Texas was once its own country, or the strong culture there based on individualism and traditional values. But I would argue that it's mostly due to Texas's unique approach to capitalism and the state's almost symbiotic relationship with the oil industry. See, oil and gas have been instrumental in transforming Texas from a Wild West railroad pass-through into a powerhouse state with an ever-growing economy and population. And Texas isn't just an oil state either. It has meaningful interests in agriculture, healthcare, and technology. However, the state...
I think I'm missing the point. What was the issue with Texas? What is the problem? Where is the problem here?
It is home to about 43% of all U.S. crude oil production, with some reports having the Texas oil and gas sector is making up nearly 35% of the state's total economic output, and 347,000 Texans work directly in the oil industry there, with an average annual wage of almost $140,000. So while Texas, and especially Austin and Dallas, have attracted several important silicon and capital funding businesses from California in recent years, the state itself, certainly over the past century or so, has been built off the liquid treasures that lay beneath its surface. And it was crude oil that first brought Texas from its humble roots, as a state dependent on cotton and cattle, into a real center for wealth and prosperity, as black gold continues to fuel all of the state's booms and busts, to a point where, in 2017, a columnist for The New Yorker wrote, "Now that oil prices have stabilized, Texas's economy is robust again." Now, the history of Texas petroleum is as fascinating and important a subject as you will find in the state that brought us the early formation of NASA, Nolan
Is the issue going to be like something environmental or something like that?
Ryan, Janis Joplin, Dell Computers, and Whole Foods.
This week marked a historic milestone with the beginning of the modern age of oil here in the Lone Star State.
It all started when Spanish explorers discovered bits of oil floating around in the Galveston Bay back in 1543. But the actual Texas oil boom came about 300...
Is that how you discover the oil reserves? You just see like a bit of oil floating and you're like, oh. Wait, I could have been a freaking millionaire. I've seen that sometimes, like in little ponds, you know? Oh, but that could be like someone threw oil in there. But I could have been a millionaire.
60 years later, with the eruption of the Spindle Drop Gusher in 1901. Then, offshore drilling started 7 years later in the Galveston Bay. But somewhere between the OPEC oil crisis of 1973 and the WTI hitting an all-time high of $147 in 2008, the oil industry captured the state of Texas in a way that few businesses, or even business sectors, have ever been able to before or since. So saying that Texas dominates oil and gas isn't exactly correct, because in reality, I would argue that the oil industry is really the one in charge. See, Texas is known for being business-friendly, for its limited regulations and low taxes, and Texas Oil has had a significant hand in shaping that policy framework. With oil being foundational to the state's bottom line, paying out $24.7 billion in state and local taxes in 2022 alone, providing the state with an average of $67 million a day in essential public funding. That's why the state representative Phil King recently said that Texas Oil is the lifeblood of the Texas economy. And that's how the $24.7 billion Big Oil paid Texas in 2022 really represented a major discount when compared to its revenue and profits. Texas lawmakers also consistently pass legislation.
I still don't understand the issue here. We're already... Oh, Fendi, can you believe this? We're already more than halfway through the video. What are you looking for? And there's still no problems. There's still no issues. I don't get it. Oh, they get good money out of oil. What's the issue?
In favor of its biggest oil and gas producers, which is likely, at least in part, a result of the many millions of dollars that Texas leadership receives from its oil and gas industry every year. That's to say, the Texas oil industry isn't just important to the state's GSP, a top employer and foundational state funding source, it's also a major funding source for many of Texas's elected officials. And while there are other very serious concerns to be considered when looking at Big Oil's stronghold on the state, such as increasingly significant environmental dangers, worsening public health concerns, and a real potential for failed safety protocols, the oil market, which is at best strongly cyclical, is built on limited, expensive, and environmentally concerning resources, and Texas is built on the oil businesses that make up that marketplace.
Thick black smoke at one point was so large it could be detected on weather radar.
The forecast suggests 2020 will go down in history as the final point of no return for the global oil industry, a date to which we will look back and remember how the production of oil, as well as other fossil fuels like gas and coal, underwent a slow but inexorable and largely irreversible decline. That's what Vice wrote on August 26, 2020, as oil prices plummeted into a multi-decade low point where oil futures were trending in the negative. But that was 3 years and at least a couple global crises ago. And by March of 2020, crude oil
this is an old video as well.
prices had already spiked to a new 13-year high. That isn't a nod to Big Oil or an endorsement for the longevity of its business practices. No, there are countless long-term headwinds in regards to the usefulness of oil in the future.
If this was 3 years ago, then definitely yes, oil is still a pretty good thing to have.
It's just one recent example of the harsh boom or bust cycles there. The highs are always really high, but the lows, well, they're downright dreadful, especially for a state that, for all its famous monikers about size and freedom, is more known for its dependence on oil than anything else.
Okay.
Again, the Texas economy isn't completely dependent on oil. That may have been the case.
But I feel like the Texas economy most likely has also been molding into something a little bit different in the recent years, because there's a lot of people moving there and everything, so I wouldn't think that it's all, oil.
Case a few decades ago, but today Texas has somewhat diversified with venture capital in Dallas, the Silicon Hills of Austin, and advanced manufacturing in San Antonio. But Texas, and especially its biggest city of Houston, remain deeply tied to an industry that is on the clock. And if Texas is the American capital of oil and gas, then Houston is Texas's Texas. So the euphoria of the booms and the pain of the busts can be felt there more so than probably any place outside the Middle East. And when oil growth slows down like it did in 2016 and 2020, it isn't just workers being sent home from offshore rigs. The city
I feel like especially tourism is getting way higher in Texas, and a lot of people are moving there, so this is definitely going to shift. I wouldn't be concerned.
The streets of America's fourth most populous city become visibly less congested, offices empty up, home sales slow down, and the wealthy owner class there, well, let's just say it might be Ruth Chris instead of Viv and Anthony's when the times are lean. And that should be worrisome to see a state at the size and scale of Texas so overly reliant on an industry that can go from boom to bane in an instant.
Yeah. What do you guys think? Would you be concerned about this? I'm not. I wouldn't be. I think Texas is pretty good. I think it's pretty solid. But thank you guys for joining me for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, let me know if you're from the Texas area. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video.